Hello, everybody in the world of Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, we are joined by Nancy again from For Your Canine. And tonight we're talking about nose work competition prep. I'm Paula Nowak with Canine Country Academy. I'm your host. I will make sure that Nancy answers all of your questions tonight. But we thought we would start with a little chat about, am I ready to compete? What does that look like? And really just soak in this good information that Nancy has for us, because she has, judged many different events and competed in events, and we want that knowledge so that we can be successful if we're going to compete. So Nancy, how are you doing?
Good, I'm great. How's everyone? Great to be here. It's on a cold Sunday evening here in Chicago. So,
Do you have any snow out there, Nancy? We've had a lot of rain here in Georgia.
yeah, no, we're happily no snow. We had a little bit. Now we're taking a respite. Hopefully, we won't get too much more.
Good.
I know winter's just starting, so it's good to dream sometimes.
It's coming soon, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Nose work is so popular and so many people can compete in it. And should everybody compete in it, right? Not necessarily, but what are some things that we need to consider as competitors and maybe even as instructors, right, to coach people? What are some things we should look for to say, are we ready to compete from the dog's point of view as well as the human?
Well, from the dog's point of view is, does your dog have the skills to go through whatever level you're looking at? So if, let's say you're doing level 1, can your dog find odor in a room, on a car, outside? Has he had enough experience in different places to be able to go into a trial situation and do that? The other thing is, have you as the handler been put under enough stress and pressure to be able to deal with that situation with your new dog? And the other variable there is, some of us have competed in other things like agility or obedience, whereas some people have never competed in anything. So it's quite a big range of skills when you've been when you're a competitor from years before, or you're brand new to the competition world. So luckily, there's lots of venues now that you can start in and kind of get your feet wet and kind of see what you like, and be able to kind of feel things out and see how you like that. So yeah, there's a lot to look at, but the dog, one of the things is you want to build the dog as strong as possible so they can handle any pressure. Because remember, when you're under pressure, sometimes performance may lag a little bit. So this is kind of nice to be able to, if you build a nice strong dog, it shouldn't be any problem. And also for you mentally to be able to handle that, the competition or whatever. So
one of the big things you talk about when you come visit us is reading the dog. And we got to attend a seminar with Amy Hero recently, and that was the big discussion. What are some things as a handler that you feel like we should be able to observe with our dog before we get into competition?
How your dog handles stress. When under stress, what does your dog do? How does the dog handle it? And then what you can do to support that. So you want to know, when the dog's under a little bit of pressure, how they handle it as in that particular dog sport. For example, if you've gone to other where you have another mock trial or something else, you can see how your dog handles it. Is your dog one of those dogs that you can take them anywhere and ask them to search and they'll do it? Or is your dog still a little cautious when they go into a new environment? And one of the things is, you want to make sure, especially if you have a reactive dog or a shy dog, it might take you a little longer to get ready to be able to compete versus a dog that really isn't worried about the environment. So ideally, you want to go different places with your dog to see how they handle that environment, and being able to read stress in your dog and then be able to support that dog in the competition. Because I think if you can do that, if you can read your dog when your dog is stressed and when he's working and when he's not working, I think that's half the battle there.
Right, because they may look really different when you're searching in a class or in your house or in your neighborhood.
Right. Especially, like, for example, if they are usually pretty consistent about letting you know have a different way of letting you know that they found the hide. In a trial, that might look a lot less strong, depending on what the level of pressure is and how they handle that. So
Right. If you were expecting like a final alert or something, and then it
right,
was nothing like that.
right, it looks different. They're interested, and so you've got to be able to support your dog when those things happen.
Okay. Now, when we think about, putting them under that stress, and some dogs are shy or some dogs are reactive, what are some things we should look for to say we're not ready when it comes, or maybe this dog isn't a dog that should compete
Right.
in this sport?
You're right. If you find yourself coaxing that dog through the search area, you shouldn't be there. It's too hard. Or if your dog can't get from one search area to another without being reactive or being worried or scared, they shouldn't compete. There's different levels. Some dogs you can do enough where they can feel better about competing. There are some dogs that are, especially, and then I'll be honest, the dogs that are human reactive should never compete. It is too stressful, no matter what venue. AKC, there's lots of people and dogs. NACSW, there's people in the room. So if the dog has some worried about humans, or it can be reactive to people, I don't think nose work. Competitions is a great place to be. However, doing classes and all that is a great way to build confidence and help the dog feel better about it with a qualified instructor, because not all instructors can handle a dog that has those type of issues. Right. So, but competition is really no place for a dog that has human issues, because it's you can't get away from people. A lot of the people at NACSW are volunteers, and you can't put other people at risk when you have that situation. Or a dog that is so nervous and stressed that they don't eat usually. If the dog won't take treats, that tells you that a lot of times they're too stressed to eat. So that right there is a pretty big red flag that they can't do it. So.
Well, and even though it's a competition, it should be fun, right? For the handler and the dog, hopefully.
Right. And every competition has a level of a little bit level of stress and pressure. But if the stress and pressure is so much for you and for your dog that it's not fun, then you might want to rethink that, or wait till it's easier and more fun. And that's what I mean. And sometimes there's so many venues you can choose. So it's kind of nice. You can kind of choose a venue that maybe works for you and for your dog, and you can have a good time doing that if you want to compete. But yeah, nobody says you have to compete. It's basically
there's no rule you have to compete if you do nose work.
Yeah, you can just we have clients that just do nose work and have a good time with their dog, enjoy the bonding. They do activities that we do, like if you have a sniff and go or something, they enjoy that, but they're not really interested in doing more than that.
Totally. Yeah. And the thing is, you don't ever have to go on odor, but if you go on odor, it doesn't also mean that you have to compete, right? It just means that you're on odor and you are challenging the dog appropriately.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what I mean. People can, they should really think about it, because really the competitions are for us, not for the dogs.
Right.
I mean, the dogs don't care. To them, it's just another search. To us, is a ribbon, and that's where it gets a little bit crazy.
Well, and we're other humans.
Yeah. But yeah, a dog that has, that is so scared and nervous and just a wreck should probably not be, or you might want to take a little longer or wait a little longer until they're more comfortable. Dog reactive dogs, your dog, that's dog reactive. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a workshop here on dog, teaching people how to get your reactive dog from one search area to another, because that seems to be a big problem. It's like you can be reactive to other dogs, but you still got to be able to pass by them. It's just impossible to open up a big, so no, you got to be able to walk past another dog and deal with that. So
totally. And you mentioned, like giving more time. What's the guideline you would give for someone, whether you have average dog, puppy, older dog, how much time should we be putting into the dog? And I know it depends, based on, their age or, their sensitivities before we even think about competing?
Well, it does depend on the dog. If the dog is, if you think your dog's getting good enough to go different places and is pretty comfortable and you go to a couple places and the dog's pretty happy working and it does a good job, then chances are pretty good that you can actually do it. From a time perspective, usually I don't. I just started my young dogs doing easy competitions like CWAGs and UKC, and I just started them maybe a month ago, and they're 17 and 19 months. And I'll give you a personal example. Today we did our first CWAGs trial, and so I did level 1 with both my puppies, my Shepherd puppy and my Lab puppy, and they did fine. And while my Shepherd puppy did well, he passed and he did really good and he enjoyed it. Wasn't stressed. He was very happy. I didn't do level 2 for him because it was going to be too much above his pay grade, and I wanted to have that competition end in a real positive experience. He had a good time. He got some treats. He found a box. He enjoyed it, and that was it. Where my Lab, she's a little more into it, and she's was able to work it out. And yeah, the level 2 was a little bit more pressure and stress for her, and she handled it beautifully. But I didn't feel that my boy, my Shepherd, could handle that at this time today, right?
Right.
There's no rush. So we ended on a really high positive. So did I, and my Lab was able to she did well at the level 2, but it was a little more for her than it was so I knew my Shepherd boy, he's still real young, very distractible. So I didn't want him to practice that type of trial experience. So I wanted him to be able to go in there, quickly find it, and be done.
Absolutely. And that applies to any age, how long it takes, right? And I think you and I are on the same page. My 2-year-old dog just did his first competition, at 2. And part of that was me delaying the process, but also, it's much easier to build a solid dog and have less holes and be successful before you get in there, right?
Right. And that's basically the strategy I like to employ. I rather have a very strong dog going in. So it's like, I'm not hoping he passes. I know he's going to pass.
Right.
And so building the dog is a big part of what we do. And so with our students and my own personal dogs. Mm-hmm. And I really want my dogs to trial in a very happy, positive way, and no stress and no pressure. So interestingly enough, we had a rally, a Santa Sport rally yesterday. I entered for the first time my young Shepherd puppy. He loved that. He was happy. He really did well in that environment. That was at this point in his development and learning, that is where he enjoys, he enjoys nosework too, but he really enjoys the connectedness that we have in rally, so I will pursue that further. I will still do nose work, but it might be a little while before he's going to be the super rock star that my Lab is. And nose work. So, and I think, and that's and they're very close in age. They're 2 months apart. One's 19 months, one's 17 months. It's just the way it rolls. And so you've got to wait and see and test it all the time with your puppies, see where they are. Are they comfortable? Are they happy? Are they able to do what you're asking them, and have that experience be a positive, happy one for the dog. That's number one. If your dog is all stressed out or it's under a lot of pressure and is not having a good time, then too much, too fast.
Right. And same for the person, right? So if you're going in there and you're not sure you can handle it, and then you get in there and you bomb it, because you weren't actually prepared.
Right.
It's really disappointing. And, it's a lot of money to invest. I have to show this comment here that Becky White posted, it's cheaper to do classes than to compete. It's like, absolutely, right?
Yeah. And that's what I mean. When you go in to compete, you want your chances of passing to be very high, not, I hope so. I hope I can pass. And that's not good for your mental management game either. If you're unsure that your dog's going to be successful and is going to do okay, there is no way your mental management game is going to be good, because you're not going to be sure that your dog's going to be able to pass. So that doesn't help your mental game at all either.
No, it doesn't. And, Hannah shared, she's competing with her 9-month-old dog, but her expectations, I will tell you, are very different than someone who's had a lot more time on their dog too. So it really does, it depends. and you learn from each experience, as you go in, right?
Right. And I know Hannah's doing confirmation as well, which is a wonderful experience for the young puppies, and it gives them a lot of trial experience or ring experience at a very young age. So it helps build up and support what the other trialing she's doing. So
totally.
yeah.
Now, from a human perspective, what are some things you recommend? You said, make sure we can read our dog even under stress. What are some things we can do to know more about how a trial runs and things we should expect and so forth? What's important for the human end of the leash?
Well, I highly, highly recommend that before you compete in any venue, you should volunteer first. So you can see how it runs, you can see what the situation is. And my students, I always encourage my students to volunteer all the time. And I have never said anybody, no one's ever said, oh, I wish I wouldn't have volunteered. It didn't help me at all. Every single one of them were very glad they volunteered, because then when they went into trial, they knew what to expect, knew what the whole gig was, and they just loved it. So, and then they were just more comfortable, especially for those folks that haven't competed before when they're new to it. So volunteer, even if you volunteer a few hours in the morning at a trial, it'll be such a well worth experience for you, because you're gonna have that level of worry is gonna be gone, because you already know what it's all about. It is much more difficult when you don't know what to expect, you don't know what's going on, and you're gonna go in there and try to compete. So definitely volunteering. It is one of the great things about canine nose work that is invaluable. You learn so much, and you really get to know how things run and how everything goes. And I would recommend doing it for every venue that you plan on competing.
Totally agree. Yeah, because it can be very different, or do it for different clubs and things.
Right.
And that's free education that you really you can't get anywhere else.
Right. Because the way you get better at nose work and doing that is to see a lot of dogs and trial. In a trial, it's perfect place to do it.
It is. So I'm going to open it for questions, because I think this is a good pause point for people who have not trialed before, ever, or specifically in this venue. So if you guys have questions, you're going to post it in the comment section, and I will show it and also read it aloud so everyone knows what the question is. And then we'll let Nancy answer it. So post your questions. We have a hello from Lotus and her family, Aaron. We always like those too. But, I didn't compete. Gosh, I did speech competitions in high school, but I never competed in dog stuff as a young person. And then competing in rally, I didn't really know what to expect. And then same thing with, nose work. You don't really know until you do it, even though, you're taught it. For me, I went through the CNWI program, so you knew more stuff, but it's really, you don't know until you actually get in there.
One of the things that's a little different with the NACSW is the dog does have to have the skills to be able to wait in the car all day and things like that, and or be crated all day while they wait their turn and come out. So those are all things that you really need to know going in, that most instructors should know and tell their students about, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes students go in there and they don't know what what to expect, and they're like, oh, my dog can't be in a car, they can't be here, they can't be there, or they can't be left alone. There's a lot of things that are in play there, so you really do need to kind of see how it goes, and sometimes when you get told, oh, the dog has to be in the car all the time, sometimes it's not that big of a deal. It's not as bad as it sounds. You really need to see it so you can have a good idea of what that holds. In AKC and UKC, there is no, you get to crate inside, you get to be around all the dogs. There's dogs that are out and about and hanging out. So there is no rule about crating and all that stuff. They're still there in their searches by themselves. There's not multiple dogs searching, but But getting, being in that environment, there's lots and lots of dogs and all that stuff. So that's why you kind of want to see what it looks like before you go.
And is that something that you work on in classes or have students practice, like that kind of prep?
Yes. Like the crating thing, yeah. So sometimes if we go on a field trip or we do something else, the dog sits in a car during the class and they get taken in and out of their car for the duration of class so that they learn how to.
A shorter amount of time, but I think it's something that on my own I might not do it, right? Like if you make me do it in a class, I'm going to do it.
Right. And also, and this is one thing it's so funny. I was thinking about. I think there should be a portion of our Nosework classes that do teach crate games or crating because so many dogs can't be crated. So it'd be really nice to have that piece.
Right. Yeah, totally. And like you said, you're doing a workshop about, getting from A to B if your dog is,
right.
sensitive in some way. It's just those little things really help because if you know what to do and your dog knows what to do, right? It's
life was easier.
Way easier, yeah. And those are things we just take for granted.
Right. And the other thing too is, and this comes to mind because I saw it today. As your dog ages too, they need more support, and you really want to learn like when to stop trialing as well, right? When is it time to keep going? When is it time to not? And all that stuff. So sometimes dogs need a little bit more. And this goes into the prep part. Like, is your dog physically able to get in and out of the car all day long? Is it comfortable doing that all the time? And so if it's not, then what do you need to do to be able to help your dog do that? So.
Right. Or is it something you say, I'm not going to do that with my 15-year-old dog.
Right, or whatever. Right.
Because we're good,
Right.
But sometimes you don't know till you go through a trial, right? You think you're prepared and then
you're like, oh, maybe I wasn't, right?
And that's okay, right? Like,
right. Yep.
You can say, I'm leaving, or
it should be a learning experience, right?
Totally. Every experience is learning experience.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question. I'm going to post it and I'll read it to you as well. Dave asked, what do you see the biggest challenge for new dog handler teams at the first level in each of the specific venues? What's that challenge?
Oh, that's a good question. For NACSW, the biggest challenge is it's making sure your dog's very odor obedient, and then just that's just the not knowing where the hide is, and then just the sitting for most of my students that are new to the game, sitting in the car or being in the parking lot all day can be a little stressful for the handler mostly. The dogs usually do pretty good, but that part of it where you're limited, you can where you have to stay in the car and you can't really move around. That seems to be the most the comments I hear the most about for the new folks. The dog, for the challenge for the dog is the stress of the handler, right? And that's why for NACSW, if you can compete, they're always looking for volunteers, would be helpful. So in NACSW, you don't have to worry too many dogs in the environment, but you do definitely think the biggest thing is a parking lot, sitting in the car. People tend to get impatient, and it actually they get more stressed out because they're sitting and waiting instead of just going in there.
Right.
Now, AKC and UKC, the biggest challenge is the activity level where you crate your dog and stuff. There's a lot of dogs out. It's more like an agility trial. So there's people walking around with dogs. So if you have a dog, so the biggest challenge for the dog there is an NACSW, sitting in the car does allow the dog to rest in between his searches and just have, some downtime. In AKC and UKC, the dogs don't really have that. It's busy. There's a lot of activity. It's loud. So it's a little more stressful for the dog in that regard, right? But for the human in those two venues, they find it very great socially and all that stuff. So in AKC, it's a lot busier environment. Dogs don't get to rest so much. The dogs are out a lot, and it's a lot more stress, physical stress, because they've been searching. Then they have to be out and be around all the other dogs. So those are kind of the challenges in each sport. And also, just the whole trialing experience for a new handler is tough. So just that stress and pressure and how to handle your stress plus be able to support your dog when they're, when they need your help at that time. So
right. Yeah, 'cause you want them to have a good time.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And Tim thought he had some great points, so that's always good. But also, he's mentioning, odor obedience and the stress and handler boredom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you have to kind of figure out what works best for you in those setups, right?
Yep. Some people like books on tape, so they have that. Some people listen to music. Some people read. Some people do crossword puzzles. It also depends if you're an extroverted or introverted person. I am a more extroverted person, so I like to tailgate. So I try to get people to, get out there and talk and chat and hang out while my dog is chilling out in the car. So I really enjoy that piece of it.
Nancy's cat's taking over. That was awesome.
He's a brat. Anyway, so those are kind of things that you want to, you want to consider when you're going to compete. You might want to take something to read or something to do in the interim while you're waiting there, right?
Right. And, I think you can also change, right? Maybe initially you don't want to talk to anyone, and then down the road, maybe you are more into tailgating. I feel like that was for me. I would say I'm pretty extroverted. But sometimes I want to be quiet.
Yes.
But and I also want to be careful what I talk about, right? So can you talk a little bit about the sensitivity of that for someone who's brand new who
Sure. Yeah, because in all the venues, you shouldn't be talking about your search in between, because it could stress out and affect someone else. So like, for example, if you had a bad search, you might be, oh, it was so hard, blah, blah, blah. And if somebody hears you say that, it could really change how they feel going into their search. Mm-hmm. And one thing is that it's hard to remember at a search, every handler has a completely different search at a trial. For example, even if you have 50 people doing the same searches, by the time you get there, depending on your time, because the variables are the following: the environment changes, wind, temperature, things like that in the place, how odor moves. You also have a different dog and you're a different person. So nobody's going to have the same search. However, when you talk about it, it affects other people. So you really want to be mindful of doing that in all venues.
In all venues, yes. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Try to be positive.
Right.
No matter what, because we want to help others to go in there and knock it out. And you do, you get to be social, you get to meet these people, as Becky has experienced, going to different venues and meeting people, especially if you can travel to do this sport. You can meet people from all over the country, depending on how far they travel or how far you're willing to travel, right?
Right. So it's really, yeah. So I prefer the tailgating part and chatting and visiting. I really enjoy that portion of it. I really like that. But some people don't, and that's okay. I have people who like to sit and do crossword puzzles and read, listen to books on tape. So everybody does things a little differently, and there's no right or wrong. It's whatever works for you to help you get through that boarding. In the AKC and UKC, there's a lot more social aspect because everybody's usually created inside. Dogs are out and about, so it's a little bit of a different feel to it.
Right.
Again, not a right or wrong. It's just what you like and what you enjoy. I even in AKC trials, I do that venue. I do keep my dogs crated and relaxed because I want them to get used to kind of relaxing and especially my two dogs are very young, so I want them to really start to learn how to just relax in between searches. My 10-and-a-half-year-old is really good at it. She's very chilled anyway. So
mature.
It's not as big of a deal for her, right? So yeah.
So we have another question. This one from Aaron. When can dogs run off leash at trials? Does it depend on who is hosting? Meaning, working off leash.
Right. Usually in NACSW, not always. A lot of times you can work your dogs off leash in interiors mostly, if the venue allows it and presents itself. The ability presents itself. Every once in a while at the NACSW trials, you are able to run off leash in exteriors if there's a secured place, which is quite a lot of fun. And it doesn't depend on the host; it depends on the venue, and it depends on what the judges think is safe. So UKC, AKC, you can do interiors off leash, and in CWAGs you can actually do containers off leash as well, which is lots of fun. So you can do a lot of stuff off leash if you choose to, but it really depends on the venue if it's going to allow that safety for you and for your dog. And what the environment, if there's any concerns in the environment, sometimes they won't let you do them. Everything has to be on leash. But it really depends on the venue, like if it's going to be okay to be on or off leash, right?
Right. Yeah. Safety first, for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We have another question. This one coming from Hannah. What do you consider counts as over trialing?
Well,
I mean, if you can get into everything, dude, you're doing pretty good.
It depends on who you ask. You know what the dog is who's going to tell you that you're over trialing, right? If you start going to trials and your dog's like, "Oy, I don't want to do this anymore," or it's not as fun for the dog, you're doing it too much, right? Mm-hmm. So. And a lot of times if you have a young dog like Hannah does and like I do, to them it's fun. But even still, you have to kind of keep an eye on stressing out your young dogs too much. You want them to always have a positive trial experience, which sometimes means you're not going to do all the runs. You're just going to do a couple and on a high note and be done. I mean, there are people who trial every weekend, and it really is dependent on the team, the human and the dog team, if they can handle that level, being in competition all the time. So over trialing,
travel,
Oh yeah, and some people try. I can't. I'm not really a traveler because I do have my own business and I am gone a lot. So I have a minimum range of where I go and where I can be. So usually for me, it's like 6 or 7 hours is probably the most I'll travel for a trial. But there are people who are happy to go cross country, and they do it pretty regularly. Unfortunately, my lifestyle doesn't allow that for that. But if it depends. It really depends on the dog. If the dog is ready to go and happy to do it, and you can see their skills are getting better, not worse, then you do as much as you can afford and as much as your dog will allow, right? So
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to segue into your experience. I'm going to actually start with a question that we got from Becky, because she has a 13-year-old dog. And her question is in regards to, she's at the other end of the spectrum. She's not a rookie handler. She doesn't have a rookie dog, but she wants to move quickly because she doesn't know how much time she has with him. And I'll tell you, he's amazing. But, how do you know you're getting ahead of yourself when you know your time's limited?
Right. And I totally feel her pain because my 10-and-a-half-year-old, it would be nice if we could get our championship, but I don't. One of the things you really, when you have an older dog, and any dog really, you want to enjoy the sport for the sport's sake for as long as you want, right? So if that means that you're going to compete with that 13-year-old maybe every weekend, but just one day on the weekend, on just maybe a Saturday or Sunday, but you and the dog are having a great time, then that's okay. But I know it's hard to let go of some of the goals but nothing's promised to anyone, and we don't know how long we're going to have our dogs.
Right.
So you really have to let go of, I want to get this ribbon or achieve this title, and just really just be with that especially the senior dogs, because they enjoy it so much, and it's so great for them mentally to have that mental stimulation. So I would the dog will tell you, if the dog is sleeping for 2 to 3 days after a competition, that might be too much. So you
Right.
might want to let the dog be your guide. If your dog, if you compete one day and the next day he's a little more tired, but he can, but he's okay, then you can maybe do more, or just really enjoy the little time he has. So it's a matter of balancing out what the dogs are capable and are telling you they're okay to do. And I'm very, very cognizant of that, because I do have a 10-and-a-half-year-old. Currently, she's happy to work. She enjoys it. But one of the things I know, summertime is not a good time for us to trial. So
Right.
she's very, and heat never bothered her before, but now she's getting older and it does bother her some. So it's like, okay, so now I know I can't do summer trials, so I'll try to do all the other ones and play with her as long as we have time. So whatever we do and whatever we achieve, you
Just
know,
great.
we
It
just
just
have a
adds to
good
it,
time,
right?
yeah. And because it's easy to get that way with your young dogs, everybody's like, oh, we want to hurry up. They're so good, but you know what? They still have. Today, I competed in level 2 in C-Wags with my young lab, and there's a little training hole there that we need to go in, and it's not really a hole. It's just she hasn't seen enough of it. So it's like, so that's a great time for me to pause, work on more of that, and develop that skill. So that's why I enjoy doing the different venues, because you can kind of see where you're at and what you need to do to help your dog, right?
Right. Because it's kind of like a test, and then you say, "Oh, I didn't know that was an issue.
Right,
I need to
right,
work on that a little bit more."
right.
Versus, we didn't do well. It's like, oh, I guess we got to work on that a little bit more.
Yeah. And with her, it was very clear that a lot of air movement was still an issue for her. So it's like, okay, we got to work on that a little bit. But she's a new dog to the sport. So just because, let's say she did really well and she passed, doesn't mean I should move up, right?
Right.
Just because you pass a certain level doesn't mean you should move up and continue going. You might have to go back and build and keep building that dog for a little while before you go back in and compete at the higher level. So
Absolutely. And I notice even with energy, and I'm sure you notice this between your two young dogs, I notice this with two old dogs too. Their energy is different. We have a trial coming up at the end of the month, and there's an opportunity to do AKC and there's an opportunity to do NACSW. And I could potentially put in for both days, but I know my energy will be lacking as well, to be honest.
yeah,
Let's just keep it real.
yeah, you got to consider that.
But I know that, Norby, while he is only 2 and he's extremely energetic, it is very taxing to him
Yep.
for all of that, not just the work, but the
Yeah.
hanging out in the car and other dogs around and all that. And so that can apply, to your young dogs, or Curly and Molly, for their 14 half and 12. The 12-year-old actually needs more recovery time than she
Right.
does, and so it's like you
Yep.
can't just do it all, right? You have to
Right.
know what
Yeah.
can you handle.
Right. And you really have to be mindful of that. So that's why sometimes if you get too focused on achieving a title or whatever, it can get in the way sometimes of the enjoyment of whatever sport it is, whether it's nose work or whether it's rally or whatever it is.
Right.
It can get in the way of that enjoyment with you and your dog. So
Absolutely. So for those who are competing, whether they've done a little bit or a lot, what are some additional things we should prep for that maybe we didn't think about when we were just starting out?
for a more seasoned competitor, one of the things you want to do is, and this goes back to mental management stuff, is maybe have a trial notebook. So after each of your searches, write down what was great about that search and what was what you liked, what you felt you can work on more, right? And so that you can learn and become better at building your dog and supporting your dog, because as you move up in the levels is how how you work together as a team. So that would be one thing I would add as you're a more seasoned competitor.
I think that helps us for an instructor too, right? Because you and I and our instructors can't be everywhere. So if they brought that notebook to you, Nancy, and said, "Hey, we had this,"
Right.
help.
Yeah, right. And also for all competitors, if you're trial site has video for purchase, I would highly recommend that.
Okay.
And whether you had, and you don't only want to buy if you did great, you want to actually buy if you didn't do great, because you're able to see what happens and things like that. So I think that's really, really helpful. And for the more seasoned folks is kind of reflect, and is that working? Is this harness, like the equipment, is my harness still good for the dog? Is the dog still enjoying the harness? Is this leash working for us? Is there something I can maybe adjust there? Because sometimes things change in the dog's body too, so you want to be aware of those things. So those are things you want to kind of check and keep on top of it as an experienced competitor as you do more. You also want to know what venues your dog enjoys more than others, what temperature they enjoy more than others. All of those things to help you become better at your job, which is being your dog's teammate, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And, maybe we can go back to, the idea of a notebook. Becky wants to know, what do I write in it? Can you give us just some quick bullet? You kind of mentioned them, but some quick bullet points of like maybe the top 3 to 5 things that you would.
So I would definitely, again, after each search, what you liked about your search,
okay,
what you feel you could have done better, any kind of anomalies that you find, meaning like that was weird. My dog did, sniffed something that was different. What the temperature was, that's usually, or what it really does matter a lot, especially especially in the case of an older dog, where your dogs did better or where your dogs did worse. And also, what you liked about your day and your searches, whether you did well or not. Always find something good in, each search you did something well. So, and also things like, temperature, like I said, again, or environmental things, and the venue, like what did your dog have the easiest time with, and what did the dog find challenging? Those are big things, because when you come away from that, especially if you do it right after your run, it's going to be so much fresher in your mind, and then when you look back at it, you might see patterns or trends that are, happening with you and your dog.
Right. So you're taking a bird's eye view overall,
Right.
what went well, what's not so great, and then kind of pinpointing a few things to help you assess.
Right.
Great.
And then, because mental management, you really do want to also how you feel, how your what your goals are, what your the other thing you want to do, look at as an experienced competitor is your start routines. Are they still working? Are they still good? Did you want to tweak those things? Those are all things you want to really consider and think about.
Absolutely. Yep. And I always think about, I think it was the first mental management that you did with us was, what was I thinking about before? What was I thinking about during? And what was I thinking about after?
Right.
Because what we have in our mind really impacts what happens in that search.
Right. And the other thing, that I noticed today, again, more ideas for working on stuff, is how your body pressure affects your dog and how they move in the environment with you, moving or not moving or whatever. So, but sometimes that's hard to kind of remember. Usually people don't remember it the way it happened. That's why videos are very important.
Right. Or if you're allowed to have someone video for you. Or
something. Yeah. Like in AKC, a lot of times, if you have somebody that's already run or whatever, you can have them record for you. Or some places will allow it for somebody to come in and record that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because then you can get a little bit better picture of what happened.
Right.
Is there anything else you would recommend for a more seasoned competitor to think about for prep for competition? And while Nancy is about to give us those last bits, if you have any questions, make sure to post them in the comments and we will answer those before we wrap up.
So I think for a seasoned competitor, I'm thinking other things you want to do is make sure you're this is for a new competitor, what the venue is, so you can have, if you need fans or cloth covers or equipment that you might need for that venue to make it more comfortable for you and your dog. And for a seasoned competitor, especially those that have been out and about, like what a lot of people in AKC, mostly I see it more often, people do care about who's the judge. And it really,
Somebody actually posted that. Yeah.
yeah,
That was awesome.
so sometimes you want to keep track of that. What kind of hides that judge has posted or whatever. Is it something that, one of the things I don't usually worry about that much because you just got to train for everything. But if you keep track of who the judge is, you might say that judge sets a lot of these type of highs. I need to work more on these if you had trouble under that judge, or the judge with certain judges, because they should be able to set a variety of hides. In NACSW, that is not, the judges are, it's the COs that people keep track of sometimes, but usually that's not a big thing in NACSW. It's not as prevalent as it is in AKC and UKC.
Gotcha.
So, right. And because the CO sometimes, it's as a CO, the venue sometimes might have challenges that you weren't anticipating. So, and that's what makes it, with AKC, a lot of times, like we have AKC trials at our facility, so a lot of the judges kind of are familiar with it. So, hide placement is not as challenging as if you're walking into a brand new place that you've never been and you got to figure out where to put the hides. But you should know a lot about air movement and things like that. That's the other thing. If you're a seasoned competitor, you want to know what direction the wind was going, about how fast it was going, and all those kind of things to keep track of and so that you know where your dog does best at and where you need to train, right? Where you need to fine tune your skills or what you need to work on for your dog.
Right.
What's a CO?
Oh yeah. You're jumping ahead here, sister.
Yeah, sorry.
It'd be good if you'll talk about CO, but also maybe talk about the different positions to get a trial going.
So in NACSW, a CO is a certifying official. And NACSW, that is the person that sets the hides for the day. And the judges just, they say yes or no. And the reason we use usually canine handlers in our sport is so that if the environment changes or they need to adjust the call a little bit, the judges have the skills to be able to do that. So that's how it works in NACSW. In AKC, they have what's called a hide steward. The judge decides where the hide goes, but the hide steward places it. And so the judge does they consider the hide placement for AKC and UKC. NACSW is the only one that has a certifying official that's very separate from the judge. So one sets the hide, the other one judges it, right? Judges each individual. So it just keeps things a little cleaner that way. That's why they do it that way. So
I thought it was very interesting, and obviously I didn't know any different because we didn't have all the different organizations doing it. But many of the judges that are NACSW are not nosework instructors. What are they, Nancy?
In NACSW, most of them are all canine handlers for in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Or professional detection dog training people. So that's where we get our judges from. So they're not nosework instructors. They're not in the biz. They are police, usually retired or active duty, or that have been professional cadaver people. So they're all professional detection type folks that judge.
Yeah, it's a little different in different venues that
way. Little different, yes.
Yeah,
for sure. So yeah, that's what a certifying official is. And NACSW is the only one that has that separation. In AKC, UKC, and CWAGs, the judge places the hides. So there's no separation there.
And those are really good questions. I know we had a student who went to their first AKC trial and they traveled to it and they didn't know, and this is different for different organizations and different venues too, about how to know if you got placements, where in certain trials you have like an award ceremony.
Right.
Others, it's like, look at the list, grab your ribbon,
Right.
and those are things that you could learn while volunteering, right? But it's different. And she didn't know that she got a bunch of ribbons, which was awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, that's true, because NACSW, at the end of the day, that's why it's a long day, because you're there in the morning, you're searching all day, then you have to wait for the award ceremony where they talk about placements, and each search area gets placements, and then plus overall. So they do that at the end. The other great thing we have, since a lot of our judges are law enforcement, they give us a little information and briefing about what they saw as far as the searches and what they saw. Was prevalent for that particular day. So that's kind of nice to know.
And you get some notes sometimes too.
Yep, yep. And you get your notes and stuff, so you get to ask if there's a question or whatever. So.
Yep. All right. So any other questions regarding preparing for your nosework trial?
So the other thing I was going to say, Paula, and this is away from this topic. What if you wanted to let us know what other topics you might be interested in learning from or about going forward into 2019? Is this something that you could, if you would be interested in what other topics you would be interested in learning about? So send us your information, and we'd love to see what we can do about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that applies to, I'm open to having Nancy, as we've been doing, because it's been so helpful for everyone. But if there's other people in other venues that you're interested in, we can definitely host lives. We can add more people to the discussion. It doesn't have to be.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. We can do a panel. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So think about, what you all want to learn about, because our passion is education, both Nancy and I and our teams. And this is a great opportunity for us to spend time with you guys at no additional cost, because this is really helpful to know what you're getting into and ask those questions that maybe you didn't want to ask at a venue. I think you can, at any venue, and everything I've been to, and I'm sure Nancy will agree, like, people are helpful.
Yes.
Whether it's another competitor that will guide you, or a volunteer, or an official, it's a very friendly sport, I think.
It is. Yep, people are there to help each other, and they're there for you, and they take, we see it all the time at the trials. The more seasoned competitors go in and help the young, the new ones that are getting started, and make sure they have a great experience. So it's nice.
Absolutely. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Hopefully that can continue. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions. All I have is just a bunch of people saying, great, love it, love the explanations.
It was fun.
It's always fun. It's always fun to spend time with you, whether it's over the interwebs or in person.
Yep, that's right.
We'll see each other soon enough. We get to see each other in February, and you'll be here in March.
Yes, yes.
So we can't get enough of Nancy, honestly. It's just the facts.
Yeah.
But anything else you want to wrap up with that maybe we didn't cover, or you want to emphasize, and then we'll give everybody their rest of the evening.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I want to leave you guys with is, before you decide you're going to compete, really think about why you want to do it. Right? Why you want to do it. What is the goal for you, and why you want to compete? And it's okay to be, it's okay if it's about the ribbons. I'm not going to judge it. It's like, whatever.
Yep.
We all like ribbons. But one of the things is, what trials are is testing what you're training, right? So really look at it that way, and really think about why you want to compete, and what's your end goal on that, right?
Yeah.
Just food for thought on that.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's okay to want the ribbons.
Yep, it is.
But
okay.
It can't be your only thing, right, Nancy?
That's correct. It can't be the only thing. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Nancy, for giving your time to us.
Thank you all. It was great.
Incredibly valuable. This will be posted on Facebook and YouTube, so you guys can share it with folks. We'd love to, share this information with anyone who needs it. And we look forward to our next topics, which are to be determined. So stay tuned.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.